And I'm going to bring them on now, which is Kenny Lauer, who's the VP of Digital Experience and for George P. Johnson, and Dannette Veale, who's the Digital Engagements and Technology Strategist for Cisco. And they're going to be talking about disruptive innovation, Cisco's global sales experience. So over to you guys.
Hello, everybody. You can all come closer.
Hello.
I may just come down and talk with you intimately. So GSX Global Sales Experience, what is it? It is our annual sales conference at Cisco. It was born out of something called GSM, which was our global sales meeting. That was a 15-year legacy of a face-to-face event, i.e. everybody came together in Vegas and had a big party. In 2009, we were given the task of virtualizing this experience, i.e. 20,000 people are not going to go to Vegas. They're going to go to 88 locations around the globe, potentially, and they're going to participate from a hyper-distributed virtual experience. The big thing that we've seen with this is that move from the 100% virtual that first year, i.e. everybody by their desktop, to that hyper-distributed model is our first big moment for us. Was that we surpassed our last GSM satisfaction score. We're obviously very score-driven with events. So when I speak about this, when I talk about 20,000 people, what I'm speaking to with a hyper-distributed is 20% attending alone at their desktop. 75% of them are in those 88 locations around the globe. They're Cisco locations. They're in conference rooms of anywhere from 20 people to 100 people, basically watching broadcast television for 2 days. They're watching a projection up on a screen. And then 5% of them are actually in a broadcast location, i.e. they're in a room kind of like this where there's a full stage and they have that type of an event experience. We have 4 key pillars that we are chartered with for GSX, which is to communicate, to motivate, to celebrate, and to innovate. So one of the things that we leverage in this new hyper-distributed virtual model is a transmedia approach to our pillars. So in 2 days, it's very hard to get into very deep details around key sales initiatives or to give them all the inspiration and motivation that they might want out of the year. It's also very difficult for our winners for that year to be able to be recognized in the way that they were at that physical event where they could all walk up on stage and get a handshake from John Chambers. So we go through a lot of digital efforts, and the transmedia word does come into play there, where we supplement our stories. We create digital experiences that help to further those conversations, that help to further that learning, that hit the communicate, hit the motivate, etc. So what you see here is some of those examples. So we created a smart solutions experience last year, very quick, video nuggets that focused on our smart solutions initiative, key sales priority for FY14. We had the ability for them to virtually congratulate each other, to give our winners a bear hug or a pat on the back. We had another thing that was team appreciation. So those winners want to spread the love out. It's not just them who make this, make themselves great for the year. It's all of their teams. We wanted to get that motivation, that inspiration, so we introduced something called Perspectives, which was a series of very short VODs from leaders like Shelley Blount, Isaac Yitzbaum, etc., that talked about inspiration and innovation from their perspective. And then we also used Cisco technology to be able to capture those winners when they were being told, specifically our Chairman's Club. These are 200 people who go to a very intimate experience with our CEO, etc. And they were the ones who would walk across that stage and get that handshake. So what we have done is we have, using telepresence, Tamberg, etc., we capture their reactions when they find out that they are a Chairman's Club winner, and then we bring that into that broadcast when we're celebrating them during that 2-day live experience. So we use quite a few transmedia approaches. The other thing that we do to get this audience to really get involved during the 2 days is what we call our audience engagement. I'm going to let Kenny talk about that one.
All right, so we had 19,500 people who we were engaging with remotely. And when I mean remotely, I mean we're not face-to-face. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you bring their energy and their voice, their perspectives into the actual event? And there's a couple key concepts that we always engage. One is the concept of presencing. So presencing is so important in social media and virtual and remote engagement. And presencing just means that the attendee is feeling like they're seen. It's very much the, you know, I see you, therefore you exist, or you see me, therefore I exist. It's very important. It's like when Norm walks into Cheers and everyone says, Norm! That's presencing, right? He clearly exists. So one of the most important things is how do you presence people? And the other thing is how do you actually bring their voice into the event? And again, globally distributed audience, experiencing in different ways, some via broadcast and some individually, some in a group setting and some individually. How do we manage this? So we did a couple things. So you see up here on the right, right here, the upper right, we did trending topics. So data visualization is important. How do you take what is going on and visualize it so that people can experience it, so they feel like they're contributing to the content of the session? And you can see we created bubbles here around what people were talking about. Remember, this is an internal event, not an external event. So we're not using Twitter, Facebook, and anything public. We're using internal tools, collecting the conversation that they're having or the chat, and then displaying that in bubbles. And this would constantly change and update as the interest changed. The other thing we did was, remember Dannette had said that 19,000 plus people were experiencing this via broadcast. I mean, they were in a room with a lot of people, and we wanted to somehow bring their voice into the event. So what we did was we would capture quotes that came in through chat, and we would push those through the channels and back out through the broadcast. Very similar, this falls under a social TV ecosystem. So you can see we have things here where we have someone's quote here with the person's name, and then we indicated live. So this is kind of what the experience looked like. And then we, on the fly, added these bubbles. So what this fundamentally did was presence people. Not only did they see their name, and we know that nothing is sweeter than seeing your name or hearing your name, but we're able to show the rest of the world that we're actually integrating things into the actual event. So both of those were very effective ways of presencing people and using some social TV techniques, bringing it into the event. So now Dannette's going to talk about how we gamified all of this.
Okay, so we obviously have a lot of things for them to do. We've got this 2-week pre-engagement where they can get into those transmedia pieces. They can learn about smart solutions. They can congratulate the winners. We have our live session activity. You saw that example up there with the video, and then our Jabber pieces for chatting, QA, polling. We obviously we need to close our feedback loop on surveys, et cetera. So what we did was we introduced an achievement program. We have, in the past with GSX, done more serious games. We have done full-blown ARGs, and we have done RPGs. And what we found with those is that they appeal to a very small subset of our audience, specifically our systems engineer audience. So I can get 10 to 15% activation into that type of a game scenario. And we use those for similar purposes, right? Those games are around Cisco priorities or whatever it might be, but had that very, very serious game kind of layer to it. So we said, you know, that does really seem to be motivating the behaviors, i.e. it gets them through the full cycle of this ARG. Gamification, that's our answer. Blow it out. It doesn't have to be a game, but how do we keep moving them through those pieces? So yeah, we did badges, right? And that's kind of the thing that goes along with gamification in a lot of people's heads, badges, achievements. The key thing I'll point out on this is, yes, there's a prizing for this. It's about 200 people out of the 20,000 people who will eventually ever see a prize. I do not have a large prize budget. But the more important thing for us was what it resulted in was the engagement levels that we needed. It kicked it up to those 85% of the people actually actively involved in digital, and we had not had that in the previous years before we introduced this kind of gamification tactic. So the other thing with our audience is they're very competitive, but this is their annual sales conference. It's the time of the year where we want them to actually maybe not be competing with each other as much and really more celebrating each other. So with those ARGs and with those RPGs, much like I'm sure anyone who's done a game here, there's all the other intrinsic underlying motivators that sometimes will prompt people to want to see if they can break the system or hack the system, et cetera. Leaderboards for our audience incentivize that type of behavior, so they're not the best thing for us necessarily. However, giving them exposure to how they rank insofar as their host city, because what we want them to be doing is going into that office. And for a lot of them, that doesn't seem very appealing. I go into my office every day. Why the hell do I need to go into the office today? I could stay at home. I can watch this from there. But we would prefer that they get in there with those 20, 40, 60, 100 people, whoever it is that we've been able to bring to that location, and actually have an interaction. So we wanted to kind of push the host city location. So we did this leaderboard around how the host cities are ranking. So you see an example here of San Jose, one of our larger locations, one of those broadcast locations, with 8,000 achievements unlocked. And then you can drill into that to see what type of achievements have they unlocked in that host city. Very well responded to by the audience. It addressed their kind of desire for a leaderboard, but didn't get us into some of the gray areas that had caused for us in the past. And what we really did was we looked at our attendee journey, and we were trying to map from the time we opened this up, this virtual event site, this 2-week pre, through the end of that live event, what do we want you to do? We want you to build your session. We'd like you to watch a perspectives video. We'd like you to consume some Smart Solutions content, appreciate your team, congratulate the winners, get to that live session, engage, ask questions, chat with your peers, you know, get involved and get your voice heard. We were very, very critical for us to get emotion back. It's a very, very difficult thing in a hyper-distributed event like this. So all of our achievements were mapped to that attendee path. And that's basically the gamification in a nutshell that we applied to this. And the results are 243 achievements unlocked. Okay, 243,000, sorry, 243 seems kind of small, doesn't it? 19,000 perspective views, you know, more than 20% of the audience actually seeing at least one of those perspective videos, 10% of them seeing 8 or more. These are numbers we just didn't realize before we put this type of behavioral mechanic, you know, system behind it. Yeah, our survey rates, you know, the completion for those went up. More importantly, the conversation got stimulated. Our question submission went up significantly. So that's getting them that real-time dialogue feedback from experts that they meet. All of this results in scores, in satisfaction, in confidence. It's one of the big things that we measure with GSX. Do we move the needle in our sales team's confidence in Cisco, in themselves? So that's how we approach gamification. We are planning on doing some little bit of different things with FY14, but we will continue forward with gamification because it's proved to be very, very successful for us in really getting that attendee to clearly understand that path that we want them to take and driving them down it accordingly. So I think that when we look at the feedback from our attendees in this last event, I'm having pickle fun, it kind of speaks for itself. The one that I'm most proud of is that this most employee-aware event. It's an actual quote, right? They felt more connected with this than they have, and they're at home. I just think that that's exactly what we were trying to go after, and I don't think that Kenny fed that quote to any attendee, i.e. I don't think he pinged it over to them and asked them to put it in. If he did, I don't care, because that's what I wanted to see. But I think that that's, you know, this has been the key thing for us, is that GSM and that 15-year legacy of that physical meeting is very, very hard for us to overcome. So we use a lot of tactics. We've talked about on transmedia, social TV, and then that gamification layer. And what they do is they just create the wrapper that we need to create the focus that you intrinsically get when you're at a physical event that you don't get when you're distributed. Kenny, you want to add anything?
No, I mean, the last thing is, you know, when we think of gamification, it doesn't always just go right to badges or right to points. It's really about understanding what kind of behavior you want to drive. And then it's figuring out how are you going to drive that behavior. And game mechanics and dynamics always play a role in that, but it doesn't have to be so oblique all the time. So for example, you know, just in someone posing a comment that shows up in a broadcast is a form of gamification because people feel good about it was selected and it was placed up there. So I just want to have the perspective that, yeah, we do on the past slide, a lot of the similar things that would look traditional game, but we really focus on what behavior we want to drive and then look at ways to do that. And certainly game mechanics and dynamics are a part of that.
Definitely.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great.